Myth number 7. U.S. officials have explained why the hijacked airliners were not intercepted. Actually, there is a sense in which this claim is true. U.S. officials have explained why the U.S. military did not prevent the attacks. The problem, however, is that they have given us 3 explanations. They are all mutually contradictory, and none of them is a satisfactory explanation. I will explain. According to standard operating procedures, if an FAA flight controller notices anything that suggests a possible hijacking, the controller is to contact a superior. If the problem cannot be fixed quickly, within about a minute, the superior is to ask NORAD, the North American Aerospace Command, to send up or scramble jet fighters to find out what is going on. NORAD then issues a scramble order to the nearest Air Force base with fighters on alert. The jet fighters at NORAD's disposal could respond very quickly. According to the U.S. Air Force website, F-15s can go from scramble order to 29,000 feet in only 2.5 minutes, after which they can fly over 1,800 miles an hour. Therefore, according to General Ralph Eberhart, the head of NORAD, after the FAA senses that something is wrong, it takes about a minute for it to contact NORAD, after which, according to a spokesperson, NORAD can scramble fighter jets within a matter of minutes to anywhere in the United States. An Air Force traffic control document put out in 1988 warned pilots that any airplanes persisting in unusual behavior will likely find 2 jet fighters on their tail within 10 or so minutes. If these procedures had been carried out on the morning of 9/11, American Airlines Flight 11 and United Flight 175 would have been intercepted before they could have reached Manhattan. And American Flight 77 would have been intercepted long before it could have reached the Pentagon. Such interceptions are routine, being carried out about 100 times a year. A month after 9/11, the Calgary Herald reported that in the year 2000, NORAD has scrambled fighters 129 times. Do these scrambles often result in interceptions? Just a few days after 9/11, Major Mike Snyder, a NORAD spokesperson, told the Boston Globe that NORAD's fighters routinely intercept aircraft. Why did not such interceptions occur on 9/11? During the first few days, the public was told that no fighter jets were sent up until after the strike on the Pentagon at 9:38. However, it was also reported that signs of Flight 11's hijacking had been observed at 8:15. That would mean that although interceptions usually occur within 10 or so minutes after signs of trouble are observed, in this case, 80 or so minutes had elapsed before fighters were even airborne. This story suggested that a stand-down order had been given.
The suggestion that 9/11
Within a
was
few
a false
days,
flag
however,
operation
a second story was put out, according to which
number
NORAD
5.
had sent fighters up, but because notification from the FAA had been very tardy, the fighters arrived too late. On September 18th, NORAD made this second story official, embodying it in a timeline which indicated when NORAD had been notified by the FAA about each airplane and when it had scrambled fighters in response. Critics quickly showed, however, that even if the FAA notifications had come as late as NORAD's timeline indicated, NORAD's jets would have had time to make interceptions. The second story did not, therefore, remove the suspicion that a stand-down order had been given. Hoping to overcome this problem, the 9/11 Commission report provided a third account, according to which, contrary to NORAD's timeline of September 18th, the FAA did not notify NORAD about Flight 175 until after it had struck the South Tower, or about Flight 77 until after it had struck the Pentagon. But there are 3 big problems with this third story. One problem is the very fact that it is the third story. Normally, when a suspect in a criminal investigation keeps changing his story, we get suspicious. Let's say that the police asked Charlie Jones where he was on the night of a particular crime. He says he was at the movie theater, but they say, no, the movie theater's been closed all week. Oh, Charlie says, that's right, I was with my girlfriend. No, the police say, we checked with her and she was home with her husband. At that point, Charlie says, "Oh, now I remember, I was home reading the Bible." You're probably not going to believe Charlie. And yet that's what we have here. The military told one story right after 9/11, another story a week later, and a third through the 9/11 Commission report in 2004. The second problem with this third story is that it contradicts several features of the second story, which had served as the official story for almost 3 years. For example, NORAD's timeline had indicated that the FAA had notified it about Flight 175 20 minutes before the South Tower was struck, and notified it about Flight 77 at least 14 minutes before the Pentagon was struck. The 9/11 Commission maintains that both of these statements were incorrect, that really there had been no notification about these flights until after they hit their targets. This was why the military failed to intercept them. But if NORAD's timeline was false, as the Commission now claims, NORAD must have been either lying or confused. But it is hard to believe that it could have been confused 1 week after 9/11, so it must have been lying. But if NORAD was lying then, why should we believe them now? Further skepticism about this third story arises from the fact that it is contradicted by considerable evidence. For example, the Commission's claim that the military did not know about Flight 175 until it reached its goal is contradicted by a report by Captain Michael Jelinek, who on 9/11 was overseeing NORAD's headquarters in Colorado. According to a story in the Toronto Star, Jelinek is a Canadian, Jelinek was on the phone with NORAD as he watched Flight 175 crash into the South Tower. He then asked NORAD, "Was that the hijacked aircraft you were dealing with?" To which NORAD said, "Yes." The 9/11 Commission's claims about Flight 175 and 77 are also contradicted by a memo sent to the Commission by Laura Brown of the FAA. Her memo stated that the FAA had set up a teleconference at about 8:50 that morning, at which time it started sharing information about all flights with the military. She specifically mentioned Flight 77. Her memo, which is available on the web, was discussed by the Commission and read into its record on May 23, 2003. But Zelokow's 9/11 Commission report fails to mention this memo. Because of these and still more problems, which I have discussed in a lecture called Flights of Fancy, this third story does not remove the grounds for suspicion that a stand-down order had been given. There is, moreover, ear witness testimony for this suspicion. An upper management official at LAX, who needs to remain anonymous, told me that he overheard members of LAX security, including officers from the FBI and the LAPD, interacting on their walkie-talkies shortly after the attacks. In some cases, he could hear both sides of the conversation. At first, the LAX officials were furious because they were told that the airplanes that attacked the World Trade Center and the Pentagon had not been intercepted because the FAA had not notified NORAD about the hijackings. But later, he reports, they were even more furious because they were told that NORAD had been notified but did not respond because it had been ordered to stand down. When LAX security officials asked who had issued that order, they were told that it came from the highest level of the White House. That, of course, would mean Cheney. Accordingly, the idea that the attacks could not have been prevented is a myth